Hey, welcome to Soul Hub. In today's episode, we are exposing what is potentially the biggest trap in all of spirituality. So you really want to pay attention to this one. And it relates to a question that came from the community that I want to read here that actually really draws out this issue very well. So the question is from Lizzie, who says, what's a good way to differentiate between the ego and the self? If the ego is the sense of self, then how can I relate to the true self if that sense of self is always in some way present? I feel like constantly trying to catch out my ego makes me withdraw more rather than actually be myself. So this is a beautiful question, especially how it's phrased, because it really touches upon the essence of this trap. And I'm just going to read that last sentence again because that's where the essence of this trap is, and then we'll get into another aspect of the question where another trap lies. But here's the last sentence again. I feel like constantly trying to catch out my ego makes me withdraw more rather than actually be myself. Now, this is very, very true. And why is this the case, and why is this happening? Well, this is, in my opinion, the biggest trap in spirituality. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of landmines. And that's, part of this. The purpose of this show is to expose all these landmines and pitfalls for you so you can be more aware of them, fall into them less, and transcend them eventually, or maybe right away even. But this one is really hidden. All right, so why, as you're trying to watch the ego, as you're trying to witness it and trying to catch its little games and all the things that the mind does, I'll use the words, by the way, interchangeably, mind and ego from time to time. There is a positive aspect of the mind, that's the rational intellect. Wisdom can flow through that if you are being, or you're rooted in being your true self, your true spirit self. Then the mind can be used as a wonderful servant, but it makes a horrible master, as they say. And so that's the ego. The ego is when the mind becomes the master. All right. And so why does it make you withdraw more sometimes when you're trying to catch it in its little games? The reason that occurs is because it's not actually your true self that's trying to catch it in its games. It's actually the ego itself in disguise. All right. And it can be a big aha moment when you realize that. Okay. And in fact, it can be forgotten. And then each time it's realized again, it's still an aha moment. I still catch myself sometimes hadn't kind of forgotten it, not intellectually, but on an internal level. And then remember, oh yeah, that wasn't me, the true I, that was the ego. And let me explain how you can find that out. So the whole sentence you used, catch out my ego, already gives you a clue. If you're trying to catch something, you're trying to catch the bad guy, right? We don't catch good guys, we catch bad guys. So already you are making the ego your enemy. And the only thing that would make anything an enemy is the ego itself. Okay, your true self is unconditional love. It is pure awareness, pure spirit, we can call it whatever names we want, pure consciousness, right? It is unconditional love. Why? Because it's just the pure space in which everything is allowed to be, allowed to exist. It's the pure space in which everything arises. That's your true being. It's formless, right? It's a formless being. That's what you really are at the very, very core. Even one level removed from that, even your seemingly individual soul is still formless. It's just pure energy, all right? And so that is the truth of your being. And that unconditional love and that pure allowance would never catch something out. It would never make anything into an enemy. Everything is allowed to be as it is within that. Now, here's the thing. When you hear that everything's allowed to be, your mind goes, oh my God, how could I just allow, for instance, my anger to be, or my cruelty to be, or whatever? But here's the thing. When you allow something to be truly, when you accept it as it is, when you love it unconditionally. It no longer translates into those negative actions that you're afraid of yourself doing. Instead, what happens is the energy gets transmuted, literally, and all of a sudden you become this presence that notices that emotion arising, notices that habitual mind pattern or that personality trait arising, but doesn't respond to it. Just allows it to be. And what happens when you just allow it to be? It comes up as a very temporary form of energy, and then it dies down. That's it. It's the resistance to it. It's the want to control it, want to catch it. And catch that bad guy. That's what is a resistance that actually intensifies it and gives it a power. Because really think about it. What are you doing when you're trying to catch something? When you're thinking it's like this big bad guy? What you're doing is you're giving it power. You're saying you are powerful. But in reality, it's not powerful. It's only our belief that makes it powerful. And so the idea here is that there is another aspect of the ego that plays the policeman. And in reality, the ego is both the thief and the policeman that tries to catch the thief. Okay? That it's both. And this is a beautiful analogy that I heard from the incredible spiritual teacher Muji, who I absolutely love, who I recommend you check out on YouTube. But it's playing the thief and the policeman at once. All right? And so, but it has you fooled. It has you thinking that this is the good part of you that doesn't want you to do these things, that wants you to be more spiritual, that wants to expand your consciousness, so it's trying to catch it. But being aware of something, witnessing it, is not the same as catching it. It's not the same as this contracted, I need to catch this, oh my God, this is so important. That's why you withdraw. That's why it takes you further away from your true self, because it's not your true self doing it. You're not identified with your true self when you're trying to catch the ego as an enemy. You're more and more identified with the ego without realizing it. So this aspect of the ego has been called the superego. It actually formed very early in childhood. And the purpose of it was society. I mean, we were taught, do this and you're a good boy and girl, don't do that, and all this kind of stuff. And so this aspect of our psyche created this thing called the superego, whose job it is to keep us in check, to keep us controlled, lest we act out like the, bad boy or girl that we are, right? And that's kind of how it relates to us in our mind. That's why most of us beat ourselves up, feel ashamed, feel guilt. All those emotions come from the superego, who's trying to keep you in check, who's trying to play that policeman role. And so the idea is that you want to be aware even of the superego. Now, of course, to be aware of the superego, you can't do it by treating it as some enemy and trying to be vigilant in this very stressful, I guess, way, or very striving type of way with a lot of willpower. That's what creates, or making it so serious. That's the other thing. We make it so serious. If you catch yourself being willful about it, making it very serious, trying so hard, that's the superego. And you'll know it by how it makes you feel afterwards. That's its true hallmark. That's its true signature. If you feel like crap afterwards, for lack of a better word, right? If you don't feel peace, that was the ego. Simple as that. Because here's what happens when you truly witness the ego and you notice its, little games that it plays from your true place of awareness, your true being. What happens is you chuckle. You literally smile and go, oh, there's the little ego again. Or you just feel like this how you would, like with a little child who's acting up, but you really love that child and you're just kind of amused by what it's doing. That's more the reaction when it's a true witnessing. So it's kind of, what flavor does it leave afterwards, right? That'll tell you, what was it? Was it your superego pretending to be the true you witnessing, which is really just creating worse and worse energy contractions in you? Or was it your true self? And You want to stay in that place of innocence, of playfulness. Here's the paradox. This whole subject matter of spirituality, this whole practice of this whole point of our lives, this whole curriculum that we're on as souls, it's serious on one side, on one level. That's what we're here for. It's serious work. And on another level, it's not serious at all. Because on another level, on the highest ultimate level, we're already complete. We're already whole. We can't do anything wrong. We've already arrived. We haven't gone anywhere to begin with. It's a play of consciousness. So on another level, there's a playfulness around it. And that's the level you want to tap into. All right? We don't want to make it very serious. You don't want to make it something that you have to do, because if you don't, you're not good. Because that's the underlying assumption. The ego says, if you act in this way or do that, you're not good. You're not worthy of love. You're not spiritual enough. Those are the messages that is always feeding you. And so you want to tap into that more playful, that more innocent, the more ease type of energy. Like just ease. And the way you can do it is literally when you notice that you are trying to catch your big bad ego, remember to just go, just go that, literally energetically feel it in your body, that switch to ease, switch to softness, switch to love, switch to compassion for this little character of an ego that causes you so much problems. A little bit of compassion. It's not a big bad enemy. It's literally a little immature kid that doesn't know what it's doing. It's the mind that thinks it's the master when in reality it's just a child. So you don't sit there and be cruel to a child. You realize they're a child, right? And you approach them from that perspective, and then they can ease up. If you yell at a child, you're very mean to them, you're very controlling, what happens? They withdraw. That's why you feel like you withdraw, right? They withdraw, they feel abused emotionally, they form a hard shell, they feel hurt, and do you think that's going to make them a better human being? Of course not. So why would watching yourself and controlling yourself make you a better human being? It can't. Only love, only forgiveness, only self-kindness will do that. And all that needs an attitude of playfulness, of kind of joyous work, so to say, on yourself. Not such a heavy, serious thing. Now, the other part of your question where you can notice a trap is this. You said, if the ego is the sense of self, then how can I relate to the true self if the sense of self always is in some way present? Well, here's the key. The ego is not the sense of self. The ego is the sense of a separate self. Behind that, the true sense of I is actually your true self, not the separate I, not the personal individual I, but the I that is just I am. I exist, not I am this so-and-so person with so-and-so history, I'm this body. No, I without anything after it. Just your sense of presence right here, right now. If I told you just close your eyes, right, and tell me, how do you know you exist? How do you know you exist? Think about that. Well, you know just because you feel alive. Maybe you feel your body, but who is it that's feeling the body? There's some kind of awareness that's perceiving the body. There's some kind of awareness that's perceiving existence in this moment. That's you. That's the sense of self. The reason why you've always felt like you, no matter how much you've changed, is that underlying sense of self. Now, it's not a separate self. It's just life itself. But it feels like yourself. Why? Because it is yourself. That's your true self. All right? The ego is your sense of separate self. The ego really is your mind. That's the ego. You have to be thinking to be in your ego. If you're not thinking right now and you're just feeling like you're yourself, that's your true self. And if you stay in that long enough, you'll feel very deeply peaceful and joyful, right? But when you're relating to yourself as I am so-and-so, even if it's very subtle mind patterns, that's your false self. So you can relate to your ego as your true self, without the ego being present in that way by relaxing into the spacious awareness that you are, right? By feeling that presence that you are that is beyond mind. And if that loving awareness is what is witnessing the thoughts, is what is witnessing the egoic patterns, that's your true self being right there, witnessing the thought patterns. That's no longer the ego. The ego is not actually online, because the ego is only the unconscious identification with those thought patterns. If as you're thinking, you're fully identified with them, that's the ego. The ego isn't really an entity. It's just identification with thought patterns that creates a seeming entity. That's all it is, right? And so if you're identifying with them, that's the ego. The moment you're not identified, you're that loving awareness that's just allowing them to be arise and die, arise and die, arise and fall off, arise and disappear. All of a sudden, there is actually no ego. They're just thoughts. There's no story around them that says that's me. They're just thoughts, and there's the awareness that is you watching them. So, Lizzie and anyone else listening or watching, please focus on playfulness, on innocence, on being a loving, gentle, easeful, soft awareness that watches your ego, doesn't try to make it an enemy, doesn't try to catch it, always forgives those thoughts, always just smiles gently, and then see what happens. And then see if you feel withdrawn or you feel more loving and more joyful than you ever have, because that's the key. That's how you expose the super ego and the little role it was playing, fooling you into thinking it was your true self. And that's how you become the true witness. And it's all about becoming that true loving witness that is the path of becoming a more conscious human being and of expanding your consciousness, of expanding the love in your heart and so forth. All right? So I hope that helps. Please let me know if it does. And as always, you can send in your questions to support@soulhub.com and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for that great question.